Hey, thank you for joining us this morning at Cornerstone Rockwall Church online. We are so excited about what God is doing in and through us as a church family. And this morning, as we jump into the Word, we're continuing in our series called United as we explore the book of Philippians. And as we struggle and wrestle with living in such a divided time in our world, we want to remind ourselves and be encouraged in the fact that God calls us to be united as one church family, one body, one hope, and one purpose. And so let's dive into the Word together. Hey, Cornerstone, how you guys doing? It's so hard to find good help in me. I'm talking about myself. I was the one who didn't turn. I'm not blaming those guys. We're good. Hey, hope you guys are doing well. Thank you for joining us this morning. Like Ashley said, we really do, as a church, we consider it an honor and a privilege that you would call Cornerstone your home, that you would be here this morning with us. If you're joining us online, we want to say welcome. We're really glad you're here. And we're glad to be here. We're glad to be together. Isn't it cool that we get to gather each week as a church and we get to spend some time in the Word, we get to spend some time in worship? You know, with everything that happens during the week, right? You go about your day and you probably are like, if you're like me, you feel pulled in a lot of different directions simultaneously, right? You go to work on Monday and you've a lot of different things pulling you. A lot of people are just kind of need machines around you. Like there's just a lot, right? And you feel tugged and pulled in a lot of different directions. And one of the beautiful things about the church is that this is a place where you can come in and just kind of be reminded of the truth of the gospel, reminded that God is for you, not against you, that he doesn't have this long list of expectations for you. Like you don't have to come in here and feel like you have to prove yourself to him. You don't have to come in and prove yourself to anyone else for that matter. And you get to come in and as we worship, like just be reminded that he is good, that he is for you, that he loves you, that the Bible teaches us that God actually delights in us. So he's not just tolerating us, but there's a sense that like a parent with a child, that God delights in us. He gets excited at the idea that we would come together as a church family and gather in a room and flip on some lights and grab some guitars and sing praises and glory to him. Like that's an amazing thing that we get to do. And so just as an encouragement, like don't ever forget that. Like this is a safe place to come and be the church. And so I'm excited. I get really excited. I love that we get a chance to, that we're going through the book of Philippians. And so if you don't know, that's what we've been doing. We've been walking verse by verse through the book of Philippians, and we're in the middle of chapter 2. This week, we're going to be looking at chapter 2, verses 19 through 30. So if you want to get ahead of it and open your apps or whatever, you can do that. And like I said a few seconds ago, like there's a reality in our world that as we go about our day-to-day life, we feel tugged and pulled. Like we feel pulled in different directions. We hear a lot of different voices. There's a lot of noise in our world, and there's a lot of varying opinions, right? And so there's a reality that unity isn't something that comes easy. And the funny thing is like, God seems to know that. Like God seems to be fully aware of the fact that you and I, like the idea of being one, to being united together, and this is what the series is about, right? Like we're calling the series United. The idea of being one is something that doesn't come naturally to us as humans. It doesn't come naturally to us as groups, whether it's a church or whatever. And you see this all throughout history, that there's a reality that it feels like we're constantly being pulled apart. And if you think back in your New Testament, right, like you can go back to the book of John. Jesus was bringing this stuff up. He was setting the tone for like, hey, this is going to be an issue for you guys. John 13, he says, they will know you are my disciples by how you what? Love one another, right? So Jesus is already setting a tone. John 17, Jesus prays for all his disciples, and what he says is, hey, Lord, my prayer for them. First he prays for his disciples, then he prays for all people who would be believers in him. He says, my prayer for them is that they would be one, the way that you and I are one, Father. Like, what an amazing prayer. That Jesus knew that we were going to get tugged and pulled. And his prayer was like, Lord, that you would unite them, that their unity together would be similar, if not the same as my unity to the Father. That's an amazing prayer. And then you keep going in your New Testament. Book of Romans, Paul tells us to live in harmony. Book of Corinthians, be united, have the same mind. Book of Ephesians, make every effort to keep the unity of the bond of peace. Unity over and over and over again. And so we're doing Philippians, and we called the series United, but really, in many ways, unity is a theme of the whole Bible. This idea that we are to be one people, one body, one church, that we are to make every effort, as Paul said, not to create unity, but to keep it, to hold on to it. It's almost like a picture of us like linking arms and huddling together, and the world and like our opinions and thoughts trying to pull us apart from one another. And Paul saying like, no, just like lock in, hold together. Like unity is that important because there's so much that divides us and so much that pulls us apart. And God knows, right? He knows us better than we know ourselves. And so he knew this was going to be an issue for us. This was going to be a challenge for us. This was going to be a primary problem for us as his followers, would be to work towards unity. And it's not something that just happens. No one falls into unity, right? It takes work. We have to cultivate it. We have to work at it. You can think cultivation, the idea of like gardening. I mean, this is why I hate gardening, is because it takes work. Right? Like I can't stand. My wife loves gardening. I like watching TV and air conditioning. She likes gardening because it takes work. Like, and just when you think you got it, like you till soil, right? You move things around. You got to find the right plants that work, especially with Texas soil, because Texas soil sucks. But anyways, like you got to do all this thing, and then what happens? Like you get it, you stand back, you look at it, you're like, oh, it looks amazing. The next day it freezes and kills it, and then you're like, what the heck happened? And then you replant again, and then you step back, you're like, oh, cool. And then weeds start to kind of grow in. They're trying to grab it and pull it in directions and kill it, right? Cultivation. It takes effort, it takes work. It's not something that just happens, and unity is the same thing. You and I will never just happen into unity as a church. We won't just happen into unity as a body. Our small groups or AC groups aren't just going to happen to come together and be close. It takes work. It's something that have to cultivate. And so that's what we're talking about this week, this idea of cultivating unity. And if you think back, so we're in the back half of chapter 2, but Scott's been taking us through the first half of chapter 2, and I want you to just think back with me to what Paul has said so far in this chapter over the last 2 weeks in verses 1 through 18. If you remember, Paul started by saying, hey, look, if you've had any comfort, if you've experienced any of the goodness of Jesus at all, in any way, shape, or form, if Jesus has done anything in your life, then make my joy complete by being like-minded, like-hearted, by being one, by working to be together, right? Be united in one heart, one joy, one purpose. And then Paul doubles down and he says actually what you should do is you should have the same mindset or the same heartbeat that Jesus had, who did not think that equality with God was something for him to cling on to and to hold on to, but instead, the way Jesus approached this idea of power was to lay it down. To lift us up, right? To have that kind of humility, that kind of a love for one another, that we would have the same mind and heart of Jesus to go, okay, today is not about me. This morning's not about me. Church isn't about me. My job isn't about me. I'm not going to cling to whatever my position is or my power is or what I'm good at. I'm going to leverage those. I'm going to lay those down and leverage them for the sake of seeing other people lifted up and supported and see them flourish in amazing ways. That's the heart and the mind of Jesus. And Paul says, hey, that's the heart you should have as a church. That's what it should look like to be God's people. And then he shifts in the last part of it and gets really practical and says, work all y'alls. Remember Paul or Scott told us that y'all, it's a y'all, right? It's not a you. 2/3 of times, when you read the word you in your New Testament, 2/3 of the time it's y'all. And he says, work out all y'all's salvation with fear and trembling. That comes off my tongue really weird because I'm from California. I'm working on it. All's y'all's? Is it double plural? I don't even know what to do with it. Anyway, sorry. So work out your salvation with fear and trembling. In other words, work together, cultivate. And when he's talking about salvation, like Scott said, he's not talking about this idea of being saved. He's talking about this growing and shaping and molding, that my life and my heart are continually being surrendered to God and being transformed by him. That every day I'm going Lord, it's not about me, it's about you. Okay, it's not about me, it's about you, right? Day in, day out. And we do that not just individually, as we are so comfortable with in our culture, but we do it communally. That it takes all of us together. We need other people in our lives speaking into those things. We work out our salvation with fear and trembling. And then Paul says a few things that should make us a little uncomfortable. He says, hey, stop grumbling. Like, stop being annoying, right? Don't argue. And if you do those things, you're going to shine. Like, you're going to look so different than the world around you. If you just do that, like, that in of itself will display me. They will know you are my disciples by how you love one another. So all that leads us into the passage we're in today. And I'm going to read it, and it's really cool because what happens is Paul kind of shifts. It may feel like when you read it, you feel like he shifts dramatically, but really what he's doing is he's talking about these two guys who are his close friends and confidants and partners in ministry, Timothy and Epaphroditus. And really what we're going to look at in this is that they are examples of the unity he just talked about in the first 18 verses. They're examples of humility. They're examples of serving. They're examples of this idea of cultivating togetherness. Like, these guys give us some really clear things that we can look at that help us understand what it means to cultivate unity as a church family. So let me do this. I'm going to read it, we're going to pray, and then we're going to dive in. Okay, pick it up, verse 19. Paul says, I hope in the Lord Jesus to send Timothy to you soon, that I also may be cheered when I receive news about you. I have no one else like him who will show you genuine concern for your welfare. For everyone looks out to their own interests, not those of Jesus Christ. But you know that Timothy has proved himself because he is a son with his father. He has served me in the work of the gospel. I hope, therefore, to send him as soon as I see how things go with me. And I am confident in the Lord that I myself will come soon. Verse 25, but I think it necessary to send you back Epaphroditus, my brother, co-worker, and fellow soldier, who is also your messenger, whom you sent to take care of my needs. For he longs for all of you, and he is distressed because you heard he was ill. Indeed, he was ill and almost died. But God had mercy on him, and not only him, but also me, to spare me the sorrow upon sorrow. Therefore, I am all the more eager to send him, so that you will see him again, and you may be glad, and I may have less anxiety. So then welcome him in the Lord with great joy, and honor people like him, because he almost died for the work of Christ. He risked his life to make up for the help that you yourselves could not give me. Let's pray, and then we'll dive in. Jesus, thank you for this morning. Thank you for your word. Thank you especially, Jesus, that you never call us to things that you don't empower and equip us to live out. And so even as we're talking about this idea of unity, and as we live in a world that just feels, goodness gracious, just out of control in its disunity, Lord, like, you don't call your people to live in such a way that you have not empowered them to live. And so, Lord, we want to lean into that. We know it's not about our strength and our ability to be unified, but it's about your Spirit working in us and through us. And so we ask you this morning, Lord, that you would teach us. We come to you with ears that are open, and eyes that are open, and hearts that are soft. Because we want to know what it means to follow you. We want to know what it means to follow your example in humility and in sacrifice and in surrender. And we want to experience what it looks like to be one family. Not just for our sake, but so that the world would see and know that you are who you say you are. So it feels like a very big ask for us this morning, Lord, but we know it's not a big ask for you. So we ask you, we plead with you, please do this work in us as a church, that we may shine. We thank you in your Son's name. Amen. All right. So we're going to look at basically three examples or three kind of parts of these Timothy and Epaphroditus and what they model for us, or the example that they set for us that helps us as we work at cultivating unity. So here's the first thing. First thing is we cultivate unity by loving deeply. We cultivate unity by loving deeply. Look back at verse 20. Paul says, man, this guy Timothy, like, I have no one else like him. He and I are, in the Greek, it's this idea of equally souled. Like, we have the same heartbeat. We have the same mind. Like, we see things the same way. And he says, I don't have anyone else. Like, think about Paul. Like, he goes, I have no one else who will actually show genuine concern for your welfare. Like, that's what Timothy is. Timothy's that guy. And he says, everyone looks out for their own interest. They don't look out for the interests of Jesus, which is interesting. Think about what Paul's doing there. He says, first of all, he says in verse 20, hey, I don't have anyone else who will show genuine concern for you, i.e. the Philippian church, others. And then he says, everyone looks out for themselves. They don't look out for the interests of Jesus. Seems as what Paul's doing is saying, hey, to love and have the interest of Jesus is to have love and interest for others, primarily. And so if you want to be about Jesus' ways, that means you have to be about loving and serving others, caring for them, pointing at them, lifting them up. That seems to be a key component of this because he's equating what Jesus cares about with the needs of others. Epaphroditus, look at verse 26. See, Timothy is this guy, genuine concern. He will care for others. He will love others. Like, that's who Timothy is. Epaphroditus in 26 says he longs for you, right? So Epaphroditus, Paul's writing about Epaphroditus, who came from Philippi. So they sent, they sent Epaphroditus from Philippi to Paul, where he is. While he's in prison, they probably brought a gift from the church, some financial things and things to help him care for himself, because if you're locked in a Roman prison, they don't provide you 3 squares a day. Like, you actually have to have people bring you food and care for your needs. And so, like, Paul doesn't just have, like, Uber that he can just call, like Uber Eats, and have them deliver. Like, so in some ways, Epaphroditus is his Uber Eats. So Epaphroditus comes and brings food for Paul, like all the other churches were caring for Paul's needs in this. And he says, yeah, like, you like, this is the guy, like, you sent him to me. And then along the way, it seems that Epaphroditus got sick to the point of death. And Paul says, man, he longs for you guys. He wants to go home. He's super bummed out that you guys are worried about him. Like, he wants you to see that he's okay. You see, a heart of concern, a deep love that Epaphroditus and Timothy, they model what it means to have a deep love for others. To think of others as better than themselves, to lift up the needs of others as better than themselves, to be willing to go like, okay, like I got my stuff, but man, I want to make sure you're okay. Like, I want to make sure you're not worried about me. Like, I love you guys. I care about you. In order to cultivate unity as a church, we have to be loving deeply. So let's think about us. Do we love deeply? Are we invested in the care and the concerns of others? Or is it built on kind of like what we get out of it? Is it a quid pro quo type relationship? Like, well, I'll love them as long as they give me this. Like, I'll be part of the church as long as I get this out of it. Do we pursue loving and caring others? Do we reach out? Do we invest? Or do we just sit around waiting for people to contact us? Well, no one in my church cares about me. Like, no one calls me. Yeah, it may be a problem. What are you doing? Are you loving others? Are you leaning in? Are you proactive in your attempts to care for people? When someone's hurting, are you like, I don't want to have the uncomfortable conversation, that sucks, so I'm just going to kind of wait and hope everything works out? Or do you lean in? Hey, what do you need? How can I help? What's going on? Loving deeply, leaning in, being proactive. Do we invest? Do we invest our time in the church because it's just a tradition? Well, I grew up going to church, so I just go to church, and I just try and find a church that entertains me well. Is it a sense of obligation? If I don't go to church, Jesus isn't going to love me as much, and then bad things might happen to me. By the way, that's called karma, and that's not of the gospel. Or do we have hearts that are being softened and transformed, that are being conformed to the image of Jesus in such a way that I'd be like, man, I care more about them than I do about me. It's not about me. I don't want it to be about me. I want to love them. I want to serve them. I want to see needs and meet them where I can. Lord, give me more so I can use it to love others with. Not so I can get fat and comfortable. Like, I want to leverage everything I have for the sake of others knowing that I love them, and through that knowing that you love them. Both inside the church and outside of the church. It takes work. We have to cultivate unity by loving deeply. That's the first thing. And one last point on that. You can't love people deeply from a distance. Doesn't work. Genuine relationships are always messy and inefficient. And you cannot display genuine love for people over the long haul in a meaningful way from a distance. You got to lean in. And God has placed you very specifically and purposefully in a sphere of influence of people here at Cornerstone, in your community, in your neighborhood, in your AC group, in the ministry that you serve in kids or in Connect team, at your workplace, all these different spaces that God has uniquely and purposely placed you so that you can love deeply, so that you can be a person who pours yourself out and encourages and reminds people. Remember Barnabas, like son of encouragement, right? Like everyone wanted to be his friend. Why? Because he was an encourager. He loved well. To be a people who love deeply. That's how we will continue to cultivate unity as a church family. Second thing, we cultivate unity by serving faithfully. Let's look at Timothy's example in verse 22. Paul says, Timothy has proven himself as a son with the Father and served me in the work of the gospel. That word for proven is this idea of faithfulness over time, that he's been consistent. Like Timothy didn't come in hot and be like, gee, Paul, I want to change the world. I'm really excited. And then as soon as things got rough, he's like, there's a thing with a guy, like I got to go. Consistent, faithful. And if you know your Bible at all, you know Timothy was all over the place. Paul's like, hey, I need you to go here. All right, bro, I'm on my way. Let's go. Hey, I need you to go there. Cool. All right. Hey, jump on this boat with me. Hopefully we won't get shipwrecked. Well, that didn't work out, right? Like all over the place. This faithful service, the idea that Timothy is like, Paul, where you go, I'm going to go. Because you're about the gospel and I'm about the gospel. You're about seeing people know the love of Jesus. I'm about seeing people know the love of Jesus. We cultivate unity by serving faithfully. Timothy's focus was that he was like-hearted with Paul. They both wanted to see the gospel of Jesus go forward, and they served each other in it. And it wasn't easy work, right? Rome's against him. The Jewish Pharisees and the Sadducees are against him. There's people within the church that are against him. False teachers and false prophets and grumpy people complaining about things. So it wasn't smooth sailing. But Timothy stood alongside Paul and said, I'm in, let's go. What do we got to do? Prison, I'll stay with you. That church needs help. All right, I'll go. Served faithfully. Timothy clearly saw all of his life as ministry. Like he didn't compartmentalize it. And this is something I think is important for us. Like we don't compartmentalize ministry. It's not like, well, I go to church on Sunday, and then if I'm super spiritual, I go to a group on Tuesday night or something because that makes me super spiritual. Maybe I'll go to a class. But it's like, no, like ministry is all of who I am. The gospel of Jesus, seeing Jesus move in and through the world around me is everything. Which means in my lunchroom at work, like as an opportunity, like, Lord, who are you putting me around? What opportunities am I going to have? How can I serve them? Right? How can I engage in relationship better? You know, even for us introverts, and I am technically an introvert, but even for introverts, like what does it look like? The gospel is more important. Seeing people know the love of Jesus is more important than my comfort or my desires or my insulation or me controlling my circumstances. I want to be faithful to that, and you see that in Timothy, a faithfulness. I'm going to serve. I'm going to be outward focused to other people. Because I love them deeply, I'm going to serve them faithfully. If you want to cultivate unity as a church, this is what we need to do. We see the same example in Epaphroditus because Paul calls him his brother, his co-worker, and his fellow soldier. He was a brother. That's a relational thing, right? Like, this is my brother. He was a co-worker. There's a sense that they were on the same team, working for the same goals, doing the same stuff, right? And he was a fellow soldier, that there was a mission, there was a purpose. They weren't just aimlessly hanging out together. It's like, no, like we love one another as brothers and we have a plan and a purpose. And that's the good news of Jesus. And all of this is how we cultivate unity. And just to pause for a second, like if I'm Paul, and I know that the Philippian church might be struggling a little bit with unity, no two better guys to send. Like I want guys that are going to go and show what the gospel looks like. And it seems like Timothy and Epaphroditus are perfect examples of that. And so it makes sense that Paul's like, these are the guys I'm sending to you guys. I'm sending Epaphroditus right away because he's yours anyways. And think about that. Like, so Epaphroditus was sent from Philippi to Paul with a probably money and a message, and they, hey, go serve Paul. You don't send the knucklehead. You don't send the flake, right? And so clearly in that, you would even see that he was already had been a guy that had proven faithful. Like Epaphroditus was a faithful guy in Philippi. And they were like, man, who are we going to send to Paul? Like one of our apostles, one of the ones, the reason that we're a church, like who are we going to send? And they're like, oh, I know, Epaphroditus. Like that's the guy. Would that be said of you? Would you be the one? Or would you be like hiding in the corner going like, I do not want to go to Philippi right now. Like I got so much going on. Would your name come up in the lottery like, you know what? Yeah, like that guy should go. That girl should go. She'd be amazing. Like she loves deeply. She serves faithfully. Let's get them in there. Is that how we approach our life? Is that how we approach what it means to be the church? Do we serve faithfully? Do we think in terms of what we can offer versus what we get out of things? Again, do we do that proactively? Or do we just wait around hoping a need comes and falls on our head? God has gifted you, each one of you, and placed you here for a purpose. No one is here by accident. He's given us opportunities to love and to serve and to connect. And when we find those spaces, those opportunities to serve, do we stick it out when it gets hard? Or do we kind of slide away like, I don't know, this is getting messy. I don't want to be a part of this one. Are we willing to step into messy spaces with messy people and let them be messy, knowing they're going to get their mess on us? And frankly, knowing that we're not all that clean ourselves. And willing to say, like we'll do this together. I'm with you, I'm for you, and I'm standing by your side. Do we see it as a common goal to see Jesus glorified? Look, Lord, I want to love deeply, I want to serve faithfully because I want you to be known. Not so that I feel better. I mean, so much of our serving at times, I don't know, maybe it's a rant, sorry. I just find that so much of our serving in the church really is about us. I want to serve because that makes me feel good about myself and feel like I have a purpose and a value. And frankly, the last thing we think about is the people we should be serving. And what would it look like to be a church that's like, man, I serve and it's hard at times. And I have to be careful to make sure that I'm healthy and I'm balanced and I'm loving my wife well and I'm loving my kids well. But man, I want to give myself for the sake of the gospel. And those aren't clean, neat lines. Like I got to constantly be assessing and have people in my life who are encouraging me and challenging me, going, hey, you may need to step back for a while, or hey, no, let's push in, or hey, there's a cool opportunity. Like it's fluid, right? It's more art than science. Like, is that my posture? Because I want to see Jesus known, because I want people to know that he loves them, because we don't just want to grow a church. It's not like, oh, we need a bigger church because then we can buy more stuff. No, like we want to see this community transformed by the gospel. Because according to the Bible, that's exactly what Jesus is up to. And you won't do it as an individual. It's a community in unity. Saying, man, we want to love people deeply and we're going to serve them faithfully. We're going to serve one another faithfully. We should be serving each other so faithfully as the church that the world looks at us and goes like, y'all are weird. Like, I don't get it. Like, wait, you actually have different political viewpoints and you love each other? Strange. Look, the bar's low right now, guys. Like the bar is super low. All you have to do is not be a jerk to people and you stand out. Am I wrong? I don't think I'm wrong. All you have to do is not post in all caps on social media, right? And you suddenly look like one of the most loving people on the planet. Like, the church should shine without any effort right now. But we're not. I want this, I'm about this, I'm about that. Meanwhile, the gospel is just fading into the background. And what Paul is encouraging to Philippi through these two guys is, no. Keep your eye on the ball. It's about making sure Jesus is known. There's nothing more important. And the way we do that is by loving deeply, by serving faithfully. And the third thing is, We cultivate unity by sacrificing joyfully. We cultivate unity by sacrificing joyfully. You see this in Epaphroditus' story, right? Verse 29, Paul tells the church in Philippi, hey, when he comes back, welcome him in the Lord with joy and honor those like him, because he almost died for the work of Christ. He risked his life to make up for the help that you couldn't give me. And think about what Paul's saying there. He's saying, like, guys, like this guy, you sent him because y'all couldn't come. And so you were like, hey, Epaphroditus, like, you're a faithful dude. You love Jesus. You love Paul. I don't know, it's a long ways away and it's probably pretty sketchy. Could you go take care of him for us? We're going to stay here in Philippi. It's really nice. Got our own paths. We got, stuff to do. And Epaphroditus said, yeah, I'll risk it. I'll step out. I'll go for it. And we don't know what it was. We just know he got sick to the point of death. And yet, he wasn't in Philippi going, guys, like, can you let everyone in Philippi know how hard it was for me? Like, can you make sure they know that I almost died for them? Like, hello. No, what's his heart? He's like, no, I want them to see I'm okay. I don't want them, like, of all the things they could worry about right now, I don't want them worried about me. I'm good. Like, I'm good. In fact, I'm going to come back. That journey that almost killed me, I'm going the other direction. Like, I'm coming back. Because I want them to know. I want them to see how much I love them. I want to see that I'm okay. And that it's worth it to sacrifice. And sacrifice isn't something we do like, oh, this is going to suck. But I guess I got to do it because otherwise Jesus is going to be mad at me. Paul says, count it all joy when you suffer for the sake of the gospel. Man, this is a way that I get to identify with Jesus. It doesn't mean we go pursue suffering. Doesn't mean it's like we want to out-suffer one another. It's like, well, I sold my car and I live in an apartment now. Or I sold my house and I live in an apartment now so that I could give my money to Jesus. Oh, cool. Well, I sold my house and now I live in a car so that I can give my money to Jesus. It's not this like one-upsmanship thing. But it's a willingness to say, like, Lord, whatever's mine is yours. Whatever you want from me, wherever you want me to go, whatever you want me to do, whoever you want me to talk to, like, I'm in. And I'm not going to do it because I feel like you're grading me. I'm going to do it because I know you love me and you love them. And so I'm willing to leverage it. I'm willing to leverage my home. Doesn't mean I get rid of my home necessarily, but it means, man, my home is an opportunity to love and serve people and show them Jesus. Christians should throw the best parties. Like, we're always the most boring. What happened? Now, we do that with wisdom. We're not stupid about it. But man, like, no one should be more celebrative than the body of Christ. Why? Because we are saved, we are redeemed, we are loved. The creator of all things is for us. He's with us. He's empowered us by his Spirit. And I want you to know that. I want everyone else to know that. My neighbors should be like, wow, like, what's going on over there? Why is everything why are you guys having so much fun? Why is everything good? Why do you always have people staying with you? Why are you investing so much? Why are you caring for the needs of refugees and orphans and widows? Like, why are you always out looking for those problems that you can try and help make a difference in? This has been the church for centuries. From the very beginning, the church took on the worst tasks that no one else wanted to do. Why? Because they wanted to show the love of Jesus. Yeah, we'll bury the bodies. We know that no one else wants to do it. We'll take care of that. Yeah, we got that. We'll take care of that. What happened to us? Well, if they don't have padded chairs in that church, I ain't going. Like, right? Doesn't it feel a little bit weird? Epaphroditus was sacrificial and willing to sacrifice because he knew that Jesus was worth it. And obviously this story doesn't tell about Timothy, but if you know anything about Timothy in this story, he was all over the map. And tradition tells us that he was martyred in Ephesus, trying to stop a pagan worship parade, basically. And they killed him. Willingness to give for the sake of the gospel because Jesus is worth sacrificing. And not just sacrificing, but do it joyfully. And so I get it, like none of us necessarily are going to stand before a pagan worship parade necessarily and get rocks thrown in our head, but are you living sacrificially with joy? Like in how you give your time, in how you give the gifts that God has given you, your talents, and how you give your resources, your money, your whatever it is, are you doing that sacrificially? Or are you just going like, well, I have this much. Yeah, I can give up this much. It won't even impact my day to day. Like, I'm cool. Like, I can, and wow, I look really, really like generous because, I got a lot. And so when I give a little bit, it looks like I'm like balling out. Right? Or is it like, Lord, like, are you on your knees going like, Lord, here's, everything is yours. The house is yours. The car is yours. Like all the money in our accounts, all of it's yours. And I want to hear what you want. Because I know whatever you call me to, again, like I said at the beginning, like God never calls us to places he hasn't equipped us to go. He's given us his Spirit. He's not going to hang us out to dry. Like that's not the God we serve. So Lord, I'm willing. Like I'm just open-handed. I don't need more. I want to be open-handed towards you. Are we willing to set aside our comfort and willing to risk stepping out to see Jesus move both in this church and in our community and in our world? Are we committed to that? Are we willing to risk our comfort and risk failure and risk being rejected and risk the suffering for the sake of showing love and being united? And taking all the things that God gave us and not has given us that are good gifts from a good Father and not just getting rid of them so that we have nothing, but saying like, Lord, like I want to leverage this. Like I want to see these things that I own make a difference for your kingdom. Thank you that I get to enjoy them. And if you want more from me, if you want different from me, I'm all in. So you let me know, and I'll go wherever you want me to go. I'll do whatever you want me to do. I'll be whatever you want me to be for whomever you want me to be it. Because I'm no longer my own, I belong to you. And if we want to cultivate unity as a church, that's the heart. It's not like, hey, everyone, try really hard to be united. Good luck. Like that doesn't unify a church. But loving each other deeply, that unifies a church. Serving each other faithfully, like really getting on the ground with one another and saying, like, hey, how can I meet your needs? How can I help? How can I care for you? That unifies a church. Being sacrificial and joyful in our sacrifices, that builds a church. That unifies a church. And if we do that, Paul says that we will shine. Band's going to come up, and we're going to wrap up in a second, but if you're at all like me when I was prepping this message and thinking it through, this idea of loving deeply, serving faithfully, and sacrificing joyfully, if I'm honest, seems pretty absurd. And where I get to immediately when I start wrestling through these things in my own heart is like, I don't got a chance in heck of doing that. And here's something cool I want you to think about. Neither Timothy nor Epaphroditus lived this out because they knew it was going to get written down and we'd be talking about it thousands of years later. That didn't motivate them in the slightest. They weren't driven by, oh man, did you guys hear Paul's writing this stuff down? I'm going to get famous. People are going to know my name. Never motivated them. Never entered into their thought process. Those guys lived that way because Jesus had radically transformed their lives. That's why. They had experienced what it meant to be united with Jesus. They had been comforted by his love, right? They had shared in his Spirit. This is all from Philippians 2, 1 through 18. They had experienced his tenderness and his compassion towards them. And here's the reality, and this is really what I want you to wrestle with. If you've experienced that, if you've truly experienced that, nothing else is the same. Nothing tastes the same. Nothing looks the same. Like you get a whole new set of goggles. Like you see the world completely differently. Do we fallen into this try harder, do more gospel here in the U.S.? Like Jesus saved you, you get to go to heaven, and you better work really hard to get your crap together because he's watching, and he doesn't put up with slackers. That wasn't what motivated Paul. That wasn't what motivated Timothy. That wasn't what motivated Epaphroditus. They had experienced the living God transforming their hearts and their lives. And they were like, well, look, like if Jesus is with me, if Jesus is for me, if his spirit is in me, I don't know, nothing else really kind of makes sense. Like this is the only thing that makes sense. Romans 12, therefore, in view of God's mercy, present yourselves as a living sacrifice. This is the only reasonable act of worship. The only thing that makes any sense in light of the gospel, in light of what Jesus does in and through us as his followers, is to love deeply. It's to serve each other faithfully. It's to sacrifice joyfully. It's to cultivate unity. Why? So that we can shine. No one's going to see Jesus in you if you're always grumpy. In all of his sorrows, in all of his struggles, I don't know, I read the Gospels fairly regularly. I don't see grumpy Jesus. I see angry Jesus, but I don't see grumpy Jesus. And so the thing I wonder, and the thing I want to ask you to wrestle with is, have you experienced his love and transformation? What drives the things you do? Like seriously, honestly, reflect. The loving things that you do right now for others, what drives it? What motivates it? The ways that maybe you are serving, what drives it? What motivates it? The check that you write each month to the church or the nonprofit that you give to, like what drives it? What motivates it? Why do you do it? If it's anything less than because Jesus is doing something in me, we fall short. And we need to reorient, and we need to be reminded, because it's not just about a behavior change. It's not about just trying harder and doing more. It'd be really easy for me to be like, all right, everybody, so we're wrapping up, and so here's my challenge to you. This week, I want you to go love people more deeply. Can't do that, because you can't generate love. You can do loving things, but you can't actually generate a heart that loves people. That's something that God has to do in you and through you. I can't either. Trust me, I've tried. I've been like, I'm going to love that guy so much. Didn't work. I hated him more. It doesn't work. You can't generate love. You can do things, you can serve people, but you can't generate, like you can't create a heart that's like, Lord, I'm going to give everything for them right now. I'm in, whatever it is. That's something he has to do in you, which should lead you back to the cross. It should cause you to go, whoa, I am not as far along as I thought I was. Maybe I've done a really good job of kind of, I don't know, putting on the Christian thing. My heart feels dead inside. And I don't experience his presence, and I don't experience his power, and I do loving things, but I don't delight in him. I don't sense his joy. I don't sense his peace. I don't sense his love. I don't long to see unity happen among different people. I mean, I try. It all starts with confession. 1 John 1:9, if you confess your sin, he is faithful and just to forgive your sin and cleanse you from all unrighteousness. And when I say that, I'm not saying like confess necessarily the sinful things that you've done, although that's good, you should do that. What I'm saying is let's confess a broken heart. Lord, I don't love people. And I'm saying this is me. I'm not telling you. I don't love people the way I should. I am far too selfish. I'm far too fixated on myself. I'm really good at putting up the front and being like, wow, look at what a good guy he is and how much he helps, and yet keep over here the things that I really care about controlling. Wow, look how generous he is with his time. Yeah, and I got a good buffer. It's this thing. So we're going to transition into a time of worship. And this isn't the time. We don't set this time aside weekly for you to go get your kids out before the rush. I see y'all. I know. But we set aside this time so that you can go before your loving and gracious Father and bring these things and say, yeah, I want to love more. I want to care more. I want to serve more, not just in my actions, but I want a heart that is transformed. And maybe for some of us, it's coming to him and saying, Lord, like I've been doing this church thing and this Christian thing for a long time, but I honestly don't even know if I've really experienced your transformation. And that may feel like a terrifying thing to think about. It's actually the best place you could be. Jesus told the disciples, he said, if the light that you think you have is really darkness, oh, how deep the darkness is. What he's basically saying is, hey, if what you think you're doing is right and just and good and yet it's not, you're deceived. You're in really big trouble. And all of us need to take the time to reflect and say, Lord, like, where's my heart? Help me to see. It's the beauty of the Spirit, right? The Spirit stirs and encourages and challenges and reminds us of the good news. So we need to let him stir our hearts. Then we just simply place it at his feet and say, Lord, thank you that your grace is sufficient. Thank you that no matter where I've been, no matter how far I've been from you, no matter how much it's just been behavior modification, no matter how messy it's been, like here and now, because of the gospel, because of what Jesus has done on the cross, I'm good. You're not disappointed with me. You're not rolling your eyes. You're saying, come on, let me change you. Let me transform your heart, because if I transform your heart, we won't have to have these conversations about whether you should love or serve or sacrifice, because I'm going to do this work in you and through you. Well, thanks again for joining us, and we really hope that you experience the presence and power of Jesus in your life through the message today. And if God is doing something in you, we want to invite you to lean in and let us help you and walk with you and encourage you as part of the church family. And so there's a couple ways you can do that. One, you can email us at prayer@cornerstonerockwall.com. We have a group of faithful people who would love to pray for you and enter into that, whatever challenges you may be facing. The other thing you can do is just go to our website, cornerstonerockwall.com, and you can find out more about our church, more about how you can plug in, how you can serve, how to get involved in our church family. And then the third thing we have is what we call our e-loop, which is a weekly newsletter that goes out. And that link you can also find on the front page of our website. We hope that you really enjoyed and were encouraged in the Lord through what you've heard this morning. Have a great week.